I didn't know that morning would be the last time I truly believed my son loved me. I was standing alone in my kitchen, holding a cup of coffee I never finished, when something inside me quietly shifted. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough to make my chest feel hollow. I didn't know it yet, but something precious had already been taken from me. Not my money. Not my house. But my place in his life. And I wouldn't understand that until it was far too late. The phone was ringing again. Not a polite ring. Not the kind that waits patiently for you to notice it. This one buzzed harshly against the granite countertop, rattling every few seconds, as if even the phone was irritated that I wasn't answering. Kevin. My son's name flashed across the screen for the 14th time that day. I stood there, unmoving, both hands wrapped around my mug, watching steam rise and disappear into the quiet air. Outside the kitchen window, early morning light spilled gently across the backyard. The same yard my husband and I had planted decades ago. The roses were bare now, winter-thin and fragile, but the soil beneath them was still dark and alive. Still trying. 3 weeks ago, I would have answered before the second ring. 3 weeks ago, I would have smiled when I saw his name. But that was before I found the brochure. Before I realized how carefully my own kindness had been folded away and replaced. Let me start at the beginning. My name is Dorothy Patterson. I'm 72 years old. For 41 years, I worked as a registered nurse at St. Michael's Hospital in Columbus, Ohio. Night shifts. Double shifts. Holidays. Weekends. I worked them all without complaint. I held the hands of strangers while they took their final breaths. I whispered comfort into rooms where families never showed up. I cleaned wounds, adjusted pillows, and learned how to be gentle even when I was exhausted. Caring for others wasn't something I did. It was who I was. I married my high school sweetheart Richard when I was 23. He had kind eyes and steady hands, the kind of man who fixed things instead of replacing them, who believed problems could be solved with patience. We bought this house together when it was nothing but drywall and hope. We painted the walls ourselves. Planted the first tree in the yard the year our son was born. Kevin. This house heard his first cry. His first laugh. His first slammed door. Birthday candles melted into the dining table. Science projects exploded in the garage. Muddy shoes tracked through the hallway no matter how many times I told him not to run inside. And through it all, Richard and I believed we were building something solid. Something that would last. Richard passed away 6 years ago. A heart attack. He was mowing the lawn on a Saturday morning. The grass was only half cut when the mower stopped. By the time I ran outside calling his name, it was already over. The doctors said it was quick. They said he didn't suffer. I still don't know if that makes it easier or harder. What Richard left behind wasn't just memories. He left security. A modest pension. Life insurance. And this house, fully paid off. We had been careful. Responsible. Quietly proud of that. I wasn't wealthy. But I was comfortable. Comfortable enough to breathe. Comfortable enough to imagine a future. I could travel a little. Fix things around the house. Maybe finally take the cruise Richard and I had talked about for years. And most importantly, I could help my family when they needed it. And they needed it. Kevin married Melissa when he was 28. She came from what she liked to call a good family, which I soon learned meant expensive taste and very little restraint. She dreamed big, bigger houses, newer cars, private schools, designer everything. And somehow, my son convinced himself it was his responsibility to give her all of it. At first, it was small. Kevin's car broke down. I paid for the repair. Melissa wanted to redecorate the living room. I wrote a check. Their son needed braces. I covered the cost. My granddaughter Sophie wanted dance lessons. I was happy to help. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself this was what family did. But small streams become rivers. And rivers become floods. 6 months after Richard died, Kevin sat across from me in my own living room. The same room where I had once rocked him to sleep. He didn't ask directly. He never did. He just talked. About how hard things were. About the economy. About Melissa cutting back her hours. About the kids getting older and more expensive. He painted worry with calm words and waited. And I stepped in. I started paying their mortgage. $4,200 every month. They had bought a house bigger than they needed, in a neighborhood they couldn't truly afford. I told myself it was temporary. That was 6 years ago. One night, out of curiosity, or maybe fear, I did the math. I shouldn't have. But I did. In 6 years, I had given my son and his wife over $300,000. Not counting birthdays. Not counting Christmas. Not counting emergencies. Not counting the kitchen Melissa had to have because her sister got one. $300,000. I never told anyone. Not my sister. Not my church friends. Not even my doctor when he asked why I looked so tired. I just kept writing checks. Kept transferring money. Kept telling myself this was love. At least, that's what I believed. I didn't know they were already planning something else behind my back. Thanksgiving was the first real crack. I spent 3 days cooking. Turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, green beans, 2 pies. I set the table with the good china, the set Richard and I received as a wedding gift and saved for special occasions. Kevin and Melissa arrived an hour late. No apology. Melissa walked in, glanced around and said, "It's freezing in here. Dorothy, don't you turn your heat on." "I keep it at 68, I said quietly. "It's comfortable." She rolled her eyes. "Well, some of us didn't grow up during the Depression. I was born in 1953. The Depression ended in 1939. I didn't correct her. I never did. Dinner was tense. Kevin barely spoke. Their son stayed glued to his phone. Melissa complained that the gravy was too thin. Only Sophie noticed me. She helped clear the dishes. Complimented the food. Asked for my stuffing recipe. "Grandma," she whispered at the sink, "I see you. I see everything you do." I smiled. Then turned away so she wouldn't see my eyes fill with tears. I should have cried that night. But I didn't. Because I still believed the worst thing my son could do was forget to say thank you. Winter passed. I kept paying the mortgage. Kept covering insurance. Kept sending grocery money. I didn't travel. I didn't fix the leak in my bathroom. I didn't replace my old car. I told myself I didn't need those things. And then one Sunday evening, Kevin and Melissa arrived with a folder. They sat at my kitchen table. "Mom," Kevin said calmly, "we need to talk about your living situation." He said it gently, casually, like he wasn't about to change my life forever. For a moment, I didn't understand what Kevin meant. My living situation. I looked around the kitchen instinctively, as if the room itself might explain it to me. The oak cabinets Richard had installed with his own hands. The small crack in the tile near the sink that I always meant to fix. The calendar on the wall with church dates written neatly in blue ink. Everything was exactly where it had always been. "I'm sorry," I said finally. "What do you mean?" Melissa exchanged a look with Kevin. It was quick, practiced. The kind of look people share when they've already had a conversation without you. "Well," she said, folding her hands on the table, "we've been worried about you." Worried. That word landed strangely. No one had asked how I was feeling in months. No one had noticed the ache in my knees or the way the house felt quieter every year. Worried wasn't the word I would have chosen. Worried about what? I asked. Kevin cleared his throat. "You're getting older, Mom. This house is big. Too big for one person." Too big. I had heard that phrase before. From real estate flyers stuffed into my mailbox. From neighbors downsizing. But never from my own son. "I manage just fine," I said. "I've lived here a long time." Melissa smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Of course you have. But stairs, maintenance, bills. It's a lot. We just think it might be time to consider other options." Other options. The words were gentle, but something beneath them felt sharp. Kevin slid the folder toward me. We did some research. Senior living communities. Nice ones. Safe ones. I didn't open the folder. I'm not interested, I said simply. Melissa's smile tightened. Dorothy, no one is saying this has to happen tomorrow. Kevin nodded quickly. We just want you to think about it. Think about it. I looked at my son, the boy whose scraped knees I had cleaned, whose fevers I had broken with cool cloths and quiet prayers. I wondered when exactly he had started seeing me as a problem to solve instead of a person. Why now? I asked. There it was. The pause. Kevin looked down at his hands. Melissa answered instead. Well, she said carefully, things have been tight. The mortgage, the kids' expenses, college coming up. And you've been so generous over the years. Generous. I felt a faint pressure in my chest. If you moved somewhere smaller, she continued, you wouldn't need as much money. And this house, she hesitated, then said it anyway. This house has a lot of value. There it was. I didn't say anything. I just listened. Kevin finally looked up. Mom, we're not trying to take anything from you. We just think it makes sense. You sell the house, downsize and what? I asked. Silence. I didn't need them to finish the sentence. The room felt colder. Not the temperature, something else. Something that made my hands tremble just slightly. This is my home, I said. Of course it is, Melissa replied quickly. But homes are just buildings. Family is what matters. Family. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I stood up and began clearing the table. Plates. Cups. Motions I had done 1,000 times before. We'll talk about this another time, I said. Kevin opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. They left shortly after, Melissa hugging me stiffly, Kevin patting my shoulder like I was already fragile. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to the familiar creaks of the house settling, the wind brushing against the windows. Richard's side of the bed was cold, as it had been for years, but that night the emptiness felt heavier. I told myself they meant well. I told myself this was concern, not calculation. But doubt has a way of growing quietly. The next week, a letter arrived. It was from a real estate company. We understand you may be considering selling your home. My hands shook as I read it. I hadn't called anyone. I hadn't asked for information. They had. I called Kevin immediately. Oh yeah, he said casually. Melissa mentioned it to someone at work. Just exploring options, Mom. No big deal. No big deal. I started noticing other things after that. The way Melissa asked more questions about my finances. The way Kevin reminded me how expensive their mortgage was. The way conversations shifted whenever I mentioned staying in the house for now. Then came the vacation. It was supposed to be a celebration. My 73rd birthday. A trip Richard and I had once planned, a quiet coastal town, ocean air, nothing fancy. I paid for everything. Flights. Hotel. Car rental. For all of us. Kevin sounded surprised when I told him. Mom, you didn't have to do that. I wanted to, I said. And I meant it. For a moment, it felt like things might be okay again. Until 3 days before we were supposed to leave. Kevin called. Mom, he said, there's been a change. A change? I asked. Yeah. I cancelled your ticket. The words didn't register at first. You what? It just made more sense this way, he continued. Melissa thought it would be better if you stayed home and watched the dog. He gets anxious in kennels. The dog. I paid for the vacation. And I was staying behind, to watch their dog. I sat down slowly, the phone pressed to my ear. You didn't ask me, I said. Kevin sighed. Mom, it's not a big deal. You travel all the time anyway. I hadn't traveled in 6 years. We'll bring you back something nice, he added. After the call ended, I didn't cry. I walked into the guest room instead. That's where I found the brochure. A glossy pamphlet for a senior living facility. highlighted, annotated, with my name written neatly at the top. That was the moment I understood. They weren't worried about me. They were planning around me. I stood there for a long time, holding that brochure like it might burn me. Sunset Meadows Senior Living Community. Smiling faces. White teeth. Neatly folded pamphlets promising care, comfort, and peace of mind. Words designed to sound kind. Words designed to make decisions easier, for the people making them, not for the people being placed. My name was written at the top in Melissa's handwriting. Not a question. Not a discussion. A plan. I sat on the edge of the guest bed and tried to slow my breathing. I had spent 4 decades as a nurse. I knew the signs of panic. I pressed my feet flat against the floor, counted my breaths, grounded myself the way I had taught frightened patients to do. In. Out. But something inside me had already cracked. I walked back into the kitchen and set the brochure on the table. It looked out of place there, next to my worn placemats and the fruit bowl Richard had carved himself. That night, I didn't sleep at all. Instead, memories lined up in my mind like evidence. The first time Kevin asked for help with the mortgage. The second time. The third time, when it wasn't even a conversation anymore, just an expectation. Melissa's comments. Kevin's silence. My own excuses. They're under stress. They'll get back on their feet. This is what mothers do. By morning, the truth felt heavy but unmistakable. I wasn't being helped. I was being managed. 3 days later, I asked Kevin and Melissa to come over. They arrived together, carrying coffee like it was a peace offering. Melissa set the cups down carefully, smiling too much. You wanted to talk? Kevin asked. I slid the brochure across the table. Melissa froze. Kevin stared at it, then at me. Where did you get that? So it's real, I said quietly. Melissa recovered quickly. Dorothy, this was just information. We didn't want to overwhelm you. You wrote my name on it, I said. Silence. Kevin finally spoke. Mom, you don't understand. We were trying to be proactive. About my life? I asked. You're 72, Melissa said, her voice firmer now. Things happen at your age. I felt something harden in my chest. I'm not sick, I said. I'm not confused. I drive. I cook. I manage my finances. I raised a child and worked full-time for 41 years. Kevin sighed. No one's saying you're incapable. Then why does this feel like an eviction notice? I asked. Melissa leaned back in her chair. You're taking this very personally. I almost laughed. What happens to this house? I asked. Kevin hesitated. We thought, well, selling it makes sense. The market is good. And the money? I pressed. Melissa didn't hesitate this time. We'd need some of it. For a down payment. You know how expensive things are now. There it was. No epalegi. Noscham. Just entitlement. I looked at my son. So the plan was to move me into a facility and use my home to upgrade your lifestyle. That's not fair, Kevin said weakly. What part isn't fair? I asked. Melissa's voice sharpened. Dorothy, after everything we've been through, you owe us some understanding. Oh. That word echoed louder than any shout. I stood up. My knees shook, but my voice didn't. I don't owe you my home, I said. I don't owe you my savings. And I certainly don't owe you my dignity. Kevin looked stunned. Melissa looked angry. We've counted on you, Melissa snapped. I know, I said. That's the problem. They left soon after, doors closing harder than necessary. That afternoon, I drove to the bank. I didn't rush. I didn't cry. I just walked in and asked to speak to someone about my accounts. Marcus was young, polite, and, most importantly, he listened. As he pulled up my financial history, my stomach turned. Payment after payment. Month after month. Years. When he turned the screen toward me, I felt dizzy. Are all of these authorized? He asked gently. They were, I said. Not anymore. One by one, we cancelled them. Mortgage, car insurance, credit cards, subscriptions. 87 automatic payments. 87 ways my life had been quietly drained. When I left the bank, the sun felt brighter. Not warm, just clear. The phone started ringing 4 days later. Melissa first. Then Kevin. Then Kevin Jr., angry and cruel. I didn't answer. For the first time in years, I let silence do the talking. That night, I made a list. Not of what I had lost, but of what I wanted back. My home. My peace. My self-respect. I folded the list and placed it in Richard's old drawer. I'm done, I whispered into the quiet house. And for the first time since he died, I felt like I could finally breathe. The silence didn't last. It never does when people realize the well has run dry. 4 days after I cancelled the payments, the phone rang for the first time. I was standing at the kitchen sink, rinsing a single plate. I had eaten alone again. That part wasn't new. What was new was the calm. No rushing. No checking my phone every few minutes. No quiet dread in my chest. Melissa's name flashed on the screen. I watched it ring. Once. Twice. 3 times. I let it stop on its own. 10 minutes later, it rang again. This time, I answered. Dorothy, she said, not bothering to hide the strain in her voice, there's been some kind of issue with the bank. No, I said gently. There hasn't. A pause. Just long enough for her to understand. What do you mean? She asked. I mean I stopped the payments. She laughed. A short, brittle sound. You can't just stop. These things are set up automatically. They were, I said. They aren't anymore. Her tone changed instantly. Is this about that conversation? Because if you're upset, we can talk like adults. We did talk, I said. You showed me a brochure for a place to put me. That's not fair, she snapped. We were thinking ahead. You were thinking without me, I replied. She sighed loudly. Dorothy, we're drowning here. Kevin's hours were cut. The kids have expenses. We count on that help. I know, I said. You've counted on it for 6 years. There it was again. That word. Counted. As if my life were a column in a spreadsheet. I need that money for myself now, I continued. For my home. For my future. There was silence on the other end. Then her voice softened in a way I recognized too well. So this is punishment, she said. No, irraplia. This is boundaries. She hung up on me. Kevin came that evening. I saw his car pull into the driveway just before sunset. For a moment, I considered not opening the door. But I did. Because despite everything, he was still my son. He stood on the porch with his hands in his pockets, shoulders slumped. He looked tired. Older than his years. Mom, he said. Can we talk? We sat in the living room. The same room where I had rocked him to sleep as a baby. Where he had learned to walk. Where Richard had taught him how to throw a ball without breaking the lamp. What's going on? Kevin asked. Melissa says you cut us off. I did, I said. Why? His voice cracked, just slightly. I studied his face. The familiar one. The stranger layered over it. Because you stopped seeing me as your mother, I said. And started seeing me as a solution. That's not true, he said quickly. Isn't it? I asked. When was the last time you asked how I was doing? Not what I could help with. Just how I was. He opened his mouth. Then closed it. I didn't raise you to feel entitled to my sacrifice, I said. I raised you to stand on your own. He rubbed his face with his hands. We're under so much pressure. So was I replied. When your father died. When I worked double shifts. When I wrote checks I couldn't get back. He looked up at me. So what now? Now, I said, you figure it out. Like adults do. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just nodded slowly. I didn't realize it had gotten this bad, he said. That's because you didn't want to, I replied. He left quietly. The days that followed were brutal. Melissa sent messages filled with blame and panic. Kevin Jr. sent angry texts accusing me of ruining their lives. One message called me selfish. Another called me cruel. I read them once. Then I stopped. Because for the first time, their chaos was no longer my responsibility. A week later, Sophie came to see me. She arrived alone, taking the bus across town. When she stepped inside, she hugged me tightly, like she was afraid I might disappear. "I'm sorry," she said. "For everything." "You have nothing to apologize for," I told her. "I should have spoken up," she whispered. "You're a child," I said firmly. "That wasn't your burden." She looked around the house, her eyes lingering on the walls, the photos, the furniture. "They don't see what this place means to you," she said. "I know," I replied. She sat with me in the kitchen while we drank tea. "No phones. No interruptions. You know," she said quietly, "Grandma, you're the strongest person I know." Something inside me finally broke open. Not pain. Relief. After she left, I sat alone and realized something important. I wasn't lonely. I was free. A month later, I met with my lawyer. I told him everything. The money. The brochure. The demands. He listened carefully, then asked one question. "What do you want?" I had never been asked that so directly before. "I want peace," I said. "And I want my legacy to mean something." We rewrote my will. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. When I walked out of that office, the weight I had been carrying for 6 years finally lifted. The phone rang again that night. Kevin's name. I didn't answer. Not because I hated him, but because I finally understood something it had taken me far too long to learn. Love does not require self-erasure. And family does not get to destroy you just because they share your blood. I turned off the light, locked the door, and went to bed in my own house. Unafraid. Unashamed. Unapologetic. The house was quiet in a way that felt alive. Not empty. Not lonely. Alive. I walked through each room, touching the furniture, the walls, the pictures of Richard and Kevin when they were little. I realized something. This was my home. Not theirs. Not anyone else's. Mine. The phone stayed silent for 2 whole days. No guilt-laden calls. No frantic texts. Just silence. And I welcomed it like the first rainfall after a long drought. Then came the letter. Kevin had sent it himself. "Mom, I know I was wrong. I let them speak for me, but you were right. I'm sorry. I hope we can find a way back to each other. No accusations. No excuses. Just the truth." I held the letter close, tears falling freely. But this time, they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of relief. Of freedom. Of love finally unchained from expectation. I sent a simple reply. "I love you. But I am done letting anyone take more than I can give. Come when you're ready to meet me halfway." The next week, I started working on myself in ways I had ignored for decades. Yoga in the morning. Painting in the afternoons. Reading books that had been gathering dust. I laughed more. I walked more. I breathed. Melissa's calls came less and less. Eventually, they stopped. Kevin's messages slowed. And yet, the connection with Sophie deepened. She became my partner in small adventures, baking cookies, fixing the garden, sharing old stories of Richard. One Saturday, I took a long drive to the ocean. The waves were relentless, crashing against the shore with no apology. I sat on the sand and realized that life was exactly like that. Unpredictable. Sometimes violent. Sometimes gentle. But always moving forward. For the first time in years, I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel guilt. I felt power. The kind of power that comes not from controlling others, but from reclaiming yourself. When Kevin finally came back, it wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no blaming. Just 2 people, mother and son, sitting across from each other in my sunlit living room, talking honestly for the first time in years. "I never wanted it to get this far," he said. "I know," I replied. But now we're here. And we can choose differently. And we did. We rebuilt slowly. One conversation. One visit. One shared cup of coffee at a time. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't instant. But it was real. That's the thing about life. It doesn't reward obedience to others. It rewards courage. The courage to say no when you have to, yes when it matters, and love in its purest form when you are ready. I look back now, years later, and I see the journey clearly. Every moment of hurt. Every act of betrayal. Every letter, phone call, and cancelled check. They were all pieces of a puzzle that led me to this, a life that is mine, unshaken and unbroken. Because sometimes, the hardest choices are the ones that save your soul. And sometimes, letting go isn't losing, it's finally winning. I am free. I am whole. I am home.